Hi folks, welcome back to another video. This time we're going to be looking more at the printing and prepping side rather than the painting. I get a lot of queries on how I prepare models, how I sort of slice them, and also just generally how I get them to the point where they are suitable to now be painted. So we're going to take more of a look at that, but I will sneak a little bit of painting in as well at the end and show you a nice finished model that hopefully anyone can achieve if they sort of follow these very simple steps. So let's get into it. So here is the model already loaded up into GTBox. Now I'm going to elect to print this guy in one piece. The model does have the option of separating pieces, but I'm going to take the risk and print the whole thing. Now obviously the bigger the piece you print off, the higher the risk if you did get a print failure, but I'm going to take that risk because I think it's going to be easier to print it all in one piece than it is to try and assemble it in individual parts. I've also got a base which I have found myself. I just downloaded this for free from Cults 3D. It doesn't come with the model, but I don't like the base that comes with the model, so I'm going to do my own thing there. So the only thing really worth mentioning is obviously when you do load your parts into your slicer, you always want to print at a slight angle, preferably on a model you want to lean it back so the supports go slightly towards the back of the model, not covering all the main pieces on the front. I've got this tilted back at around a 15-degree angle. He's a large piece, so I'm printing him hollow. Now, what I've done is rather than have the infill with supports, I just used the grid 3D structure with 11% fill and density. So if I tilt that, you'll see that's what it looks like on the inside. So it's got this grid pattern, which helps the model print, gives it lots of support, and yeah, just generally get a better result with that way. So just need to load up each of the pieces. I'm going to go with medium supports on each piece. Just hit all. I have the density percentage set as 48%. Obviously that's something you can change. I've also slightly reduced the contact diameters and depth of each of the three options of supports, just because I find that leaves slightly less of a mess when you have to clean up the supports. That there's a slightly less indentation. So I'm going to do medium again on this. I think given that he's printing hollow, although he's a large piece, I think he should be okay to print with medium supports. I don't think he's going to fall off the supports. So that's what it looks like. He fits on the build plate just about. I also do supports always with a raft as well. I find that gives much better results. So just need to hit slice and then save this onto my USB. Now it does give you a time that it thinks it's going to take to print, saying 13 hours 15 minutes. I find that it's always wrong. You need to add around about 20% on. I wouldn't be surprised if this takes closer to 15 and a half hours to print. We'll see once it comes off the printer. So that's what I'm about to do now. I will print this in water washable resin, and I will come back and show you, hopefully, that it is printed okay. Right then, let's take a look to see how this has turned out. So this took quite a long time to do. Took over 15, nearly just a short 16 hours. Okay, we can see something inside the case, so let's get this off. And take a look. Okay, so obviously he's hanging upside down, but there's the figure, and there's the base off to the side. So far so good, but until we get him off the plate we won't know for sure. Okay, how is he looking? Not too bad. Looks like he's all in one piece. Looks like the base came out okay. So I'm going to get this guy cleaned up, get these supports off, and we'll take it from there. Now I'm actually struggling to find containers big enough to put this guy in, but I like to use water washable resin. Now the nice thing of that is obviously you can wash the prints off in water, hence its name. I like to use quite hot water, and I like to let it soak for a little while, and then what that does is it makes it slightly easier for the supports to come off. So there you go, let's check that out. Come off like butter, and you can actually see the steam coming off the water there.
So let's turn this guy around. Still got a couple supports here and there to get off. Nothing too bad. So we're going to give him a nice bath. And now obviously he's hollow. So we're going to make sure that there's plenty of water that goes into those holes. So we wash him from the inside out. Make sure we swish around lots of water. And you can see the water pours nicely out. So removes any resin that's uncured inside. And then what I like to do after he's had his first little wash, I change the water, add some washing up liquid so it's nice and bubbly, and then I give him another little bubble bath with the clean water. I'll also throw in the base too, and I'll let him swish around in there. And then what I'll do is come in with one of these electric brushes and give him a proper brushing all over, just to make sure that any last little bit of residue of that resin is off him. And here he is, all fresh out of his bubble bath. Now what you need to do at this stage is to let him dry completely. You can see he's obviously still covered in bubbles and whatnot. You need him to be completely dry before you then start to do the final curing on him. If there's still residue or any water left behind, what will end up happening is if you then cure it, you'll get like a white powdery effect, and it'll start to block up some of the recesses and the details. So make sure he's completely dry, and then come and finish him off with a UV light or put him in the sun. Okay, so he has now been cured, so we can finally see what we're dealing with. Now on the whole, it's not looking too bad. Now you can see some sort of different coloration here. That is simply where there's been two resins in the tank and one is slightly mixed with another, so it just causes this kind of weird colouring, but it's purely just the colour of the resin. It's just, you know, once you spray primer over it, you won't see that at all. So the base came out okay, pretty much as to be expected, pretty simple. Greedo's looking not too bad. The only issue I've seen is just a couple of spots where it hasn't fully printed. So we've just got a little bit of a gap here, and we've got another one just up there as well. Now, answers on a postcard as to why that happens, because I can't see that it was a supporting issue. And in fact, there's plenty, you know, because obviously it was printing upside down in layers, there was certainly sufficient layers for it to print on top of, particularly that one. I mean, that makes no sense at all, why there's just like a hole there. So not too sure why that is, but could be worse, especially on a big print like this. You know, I'm more than happy that those are the only two issues. They can be filled up with a bit of resin, and so that's fine. So obviously you've got all the support marks on the underside. All those need to be sanded off. But yeah, everything's there. All fingers and thumbs and toes and whatnot are all accounted for. So he is good to go. So now it's on to the repair job for these two bits and lots of sanding. But before I do all that sanding, I'm going to take care of these couple of holes in the head first. So to do this, I've literally just got a little bit of printer resin, which I've put in one of these little dropper bottles, which has got quite a fine needle on it. If you do this and you want to store it, you need to cover the bottle up with black tape, because despite you putting it in a cupboard or whatever in a darkened room, it will go solid otherwise. So this stuff is quite easy to deal with because it's essentially self-leveling. So let's deal with this hole here. So all you need to do is just squirt a little bit in. You just want to do a little bit at a time. As I say, it's self-leveling, so just let it do its thing. If you see any sort of bubble, just get rid of it. And then, when you're happy, you just get yourself a UV light. And after a couple of seconds, that should be solid. So this is just one of those fairly cheap lights that I use as part of my curing station. Okay, so that's now solid. Not perfect job, so I just need to do another couple of passes again with this, get it level, and then give it a little bit of a sand as well. I'm going to do the same thing for this hole down here. after a few passes using the resin and UV light, you can see that the holes are now patched up. So not perfect yet, as will still require a bit of sanding, but a whole lot better than they were. So how do I do the sanding? I like to use one of these rotary tools, and this is one of the sort of the battery powered ones. You don't want the mains powered ones, they're a little bit too powerful. So this is one of those rechargeable ones. It was pretty cheap. I think I picked this up at somewhere like the Range, something like that, for like £20, and it comes with a whole host of attachments. But the attachment I want to use is the one for sanding. So you get like these little sanding discs that come with it. Now the problem is the sanding discs that will come with this will be too rough. My preferred method is using sandpaper that is P800. So what I like to do is, as a little hack here, is to make my own sanding discs. I simply get a penny, draw around the penny, and then cut that out, and then essentially that will give me a perfect size as a nice sanding disc. So yes, this is one I prepared earlier, and you can see I've already used it. And then yeah, you just attach it obviously to this tool with the screw in between, and then hook that in to your rotary tool bit, and away you go. So while sanding, I like to have a tray of water out just to try and catch as much of the resin dust as possible. It's not going to catch everything, a lot is still going to go into the air, but I figure anything that goes in here will stay in here. Obviously wear a mask when you're doing this. I'm also going to come back in later and use the same water again when I'm looking to do a little bit of finer sanding using these microfiber sanding sheets. So after about 40-45 minutes worth of sanding, this is what I'm left with. So hopefully I've got most of the main areas. There's probably going to be a few little marks here and there which I'm probably not going to spot until I primer it. So speaking of which, that's the next step. So I like to use automotive primer. It's cheaper, you tend to get it in larger cans, so it's better value for your money. Also, it's quite strong stuff because obviously it's used for car panels. Generally speaking, it'll have a degree of flexibility in the paint. You think of like a car panel that's got curves, and obviously there is slight flex in it. So what you don't want to have is a primer that essentially chips away too easily. So this is why I tend to go for this stuff. So I'm going to spray the whole model in grey, and I'm going to do the base in black. I have also just drilled in a pin on the foot and done a hole in the base. Just to make it a little bit easier for him when I come to glue it into place, so it'll be a little bit more solid. Right, I'm off outside to do some spraying. Okay, so after a coat of grey primer, he's looking a lot more tidy, and now this is helping me to see if I've missed any bits of areas that need a little bit more attention, a little bit more sanding. So there's a couple of divots just here on the back. My main concern is actually there's a line that's running across the head here, so I'm going to have to sand that out. I don't know why that happens. You get this quite often. It's almost like it's a layer shift during the printing. So again, if anyone knows how that happens, please let me know. But it does seem to happen every so often. I noticed it when I was originally sanding it, and I tried to get rid of it because it was going across the eyes, although again, I haven't done a perfect job there. But on the whole, it's not too bad, so I'll try and get rid of that line and just a little couple of bits on the back, and then I think we should be good to go. Now for the base, I have sprayed that black, and I've also covered it over with a varnish. So just seal in the paint, give it a little bit of a shine, and that is all done. I've just placed a couple of pads on the bottom there. So I'm going to do a quick bit of sanding and then a re-primer on this model, and then we should be ready to go and start to paint. After that second round of sanding and priming, I'm now ready to start painting him. So this is normally where I start most videos at this stage, but the paint job on this is going to be very simple. It's just going to be straightforward colours, no colour blending or anything like that. It doesn't suit the model. It's a nice cartoony, chibi style model, so just simple flat colours. So to start with, I'm going to go with some wire flesh, which is a nice sort of darkish green, and I'm going to apply this all over the skin. Okay, quick rethink. I think this colour isn't working. It's too dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this colour in for the centre of the mouth, the ears and the tentacles on the top, or whatever you call these things. And instead I'm going to do the skin medium olive instead. So it's a bit brighter, but I think for this sort of cartoony style, I think that's a better colour to go with. Yep, that green is looking much closer to what I think it should look like. So that's the green all done. So I'm going to paint in the eyes next. Now for this, what I'm going to do is effectively make up a metallic colour. So I want the eyes to be a nice dark blue, but I also want them to be sparkling. So essentially, if you mix this fairy dust with any paint, it's supposed to change it kind of metallic looking. And yeah, it's sort of done that. It's definitely kind of sparkly. So I'm going to use this now, and we're going to paint on the eyes. And I'm going to use that fairy dust again, this time mixing it with some black, and I'm going to use this colour for the gun. So I should have a nice sparkly black now. The only trouble with this fairy dust is it is white, so it does actually change the colour of the paint you're using. It does lighten it up slightly. But beyond that, it does seem to work. Next up is going to be some deck tan. I'm just going to paint in the little highlights across the eyes here. Okay, we're going to continue to work down the body of the model. This time I'm going to use some Zimmer blue. I want to paint this in for all the clothing. So that's his top and his trousers. I'm going to do his waistcoat next, and I'm going to use some Parasite Brown for that. And we're going to take some Mornfang Brown now, and that is for his gun belt and holster. I'm going to take some Oily Steel next, and this is going to be for all the little silver bits across the belt. Next up, we're going to take some Yellow Ochre, and this is going to be for all the stripes across his arms and also across his trousers. Last up is just the shoes, so for this I'm going to use some Rakarth Flesh. So as the paint on the shoes dries, I'm going to call that finished for the painting. So all I'm going to do now is spray this with a satin varnish, glue them on the base, and I will come back and show you the final result. The finished model, so you can see with the coat of varnish over it, it brings a nice sort of glossy effect, which is what I was after. In fact, I can bring in another character that I made recently on the similar sort of design. So you can see very easily and very quickly you can build up a nice little collection of models that are super easy to make and pretty easy to paint and will look nice in the collection. just goes to show you don't always have to paint something overly complicated and realistic to have a nice little model at the end of it. So I hope you enjoyed that little look behind how I go about printing and prepping the models. And if you enjoyed the content, then please consider subscribing, liking, leaving a comment, all that jazz, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.